Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Pasture-Raised podcast. Thanks for listening in again. I hope you've enjoyed the first 3 episodes and gotten a taste of what we're going for here. As far as what's staying the same, we're going to continue to do a bunch of interviews with farmers about what's going on their farms and what we can learn from them. In terms of what will be changing, first of all, I know with new podcasts, there's almost a ubiquitous plea to be patient as we work on sound quality. So the next few episodes coming out will be ones that were recorded with a little bit less good sound quality, but I think really good quality conversation. And then hopefully you'll start seeing before long some episodes with a little bit better sounding sound. So thanks for your patience. Secondly, we've got some episodes that will be deviating from what you've heard with Dave and Jordan, some that might be a little bit more topical. And today will be one of those. Instead of chatting with a farmer about what's going on their farm, my plan will be to sometimes talk to farmers about other things. And specifically today, we're going to talk with Ben Grimes of Dawnbreaker Farms, and he's going to help us break down the APPPA conference. We've got another episode already recorded with Ben where we're talking about some of the things that he has to offer this podcast, and you'll be able to hear just a little bit in this episode about him and his farm and how he farms and why he farms the way he does. But today we're focusing mostly on the APPPA conference, and I'm putting this episode out first before we introduce you more formally to Ben. And that's mostly just because the APPPA conference is still a little bit fresh. It happened less than a month ago. So I'd like to go ahead and get this recap episode out. We do talk a lot about what we learned at the APPPA conference and at the field day / pasture walk at Dave and Ginger Shields' farm. So this will be helping provide some context to Dave's episode from episode 2 as well. We do also get into a little bit of an overview of how Ben and I raise chickens in a sort of what's often called a day range system. And so that's sort of the one thing where we're sort of diving into some details about farming, not so much about the APPPA conference. With regards to the day range model of raising pasture poultry, I'll explain a little bit more about it than what Ben and I provide later in the conversation. One thing of note, the name is a bit of a misnomer as far as I'm concerned. We raise chickens out on pasture. They have electric netting around them. They have a dog protecting them. They have a roof they can go under freely when they want to. And within that electric netting paddock, their shelters and their feeders and their waterers all get moved every single day. But day or night, they have the opportunity to go where they choose to go. That's what we mean when we say day range, just because other people call it that. But neither one of us are locking up our chickens at night. We're doing it in large part because we believe that it saves us time and labor. So locking chickens up at night in a structure is not something either one of us intends to do at all. It would mostly defeat the purpose for us. So it's called day range by a lot of people, but I think a lot of those people who called it that are locking their chickens up at night, and we don't do that. It's something that a lot of people know me for, I think, because Diego Footer has shot a video at my farm, and I've also been on the Grass-Fed Life podcast talking about it some. And so there's some information out there about it where I'd get it further into it. We've changed our systems. If you've seen that YouTube video before, it's a bit different than it was back then, but in general, the same principles apply. Personally, I don't have any books to sell or any reasons to convince you to take out the walls in your pasture poultry systems, but we do discuss why we do it the way we do it if you care to listen to that. And I don't have anything bad to say about various forms of chicken tractor systems that are out there. But we'll have that as a part of this conversation. Feel free to listen and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy this, and I just want to say thanks to all the folks who put on the APPPA conference. It was a treat to be able to gather with other pasture poultry farmers and just discuss everything about our craft. And I really appreciate all the folks who put on the conference, from the Shieldses to the whole board of APPPA and everybody else who helped to host it and plan it and lead it. It was a really special time for a lot of farmers out there. We're back here with Ben Grimes from Dawnbreaker Farms. We are just coming off of having experienced the Farmer Hive, having been to the American Pasture Poultry Producers Association Conference, APPPA, or as we like to jokingly say, APPPA. We went to APPPA in its 4th year running a conference here in Jacksonville, Florida.
with about 210 other pasture poultry producers. We gathered and talked about all things raising poultry on grass. And this conference is one that I've been to once. I know it's Ben's first time. And we were able to just learn a lot and gather with people who have a similar course in life and enjoy each other's company for about 3 days. And I thought we'd spend some time here chatting some about the stuff we learned. And Ben, thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, real quick, tell me what you thought of the conference in your first year there and how it went for you.
Yeah, I think the APPPA conference was really great for me. It's kind of cathartic in a way to be in a room full of people who all understand pasture poultry.
Yeah.
One of the APPPA board members was, joking about how, about loading up chickens in the rain, and how there's nowhere else in the world where you can be in a room full of people who understand that problem.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it is. It's I think the best word for it is cathartic. To be like, oh yeah, I'm around people who understand me.
Yeah. If this isn't my tribe, who is? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was really good. I think APPPA is a really great organization. I haven't had much experience with them before now, but it's they're really sincere in what they do, and they want to see farmers succeed and see pasture poultry succeed. It's a group of people who really believe in what they're doing and want to push that milestone further ahead.
And APPPA has, like I said, run this conference for 4 years, and the sort of the way that they bill it, Mike, the director, calls it an unconference, which is I guess maybe a term I've heard in other spaces, even though I don't really attend conferences much. But the idea is that there's not a keynote speaker and a bunch of PowerPoint presentations, breakout sessions where somebody's sort of giving their one person's opinion on the best way to get started in raising pasture poultry. In my opinion, many of these other conferences that I've been to, you'll get a very quick overview of a topic, or maybe even going deep with just kind of one person standing up and talking as the expert. And there's some great experts out there who I love to hear from, but the amazing thing about this conference is any room you walked into, you could hear from 20 experts on a particular topic. And you could catch different ways that different people in the room have solved the same problem, or a set of problems that you might not have even thought would be on your horizon someday. So we were very thankful to have the opportunity to just get to head to this conference and learn it in a way that didn't feel stuffy and was all about making sure that we got the experience we wanted to, and that we could access each other as members, because there really are, within the membership of APPPA, a whole lot of legitimate, bona fide experts and brilliant people when it comes to how they've troubleshooted, invented, and worked their way out of all sorts of problems on their farms. Would you say that's your experience?
Absolutely. I was definitely impressed with the caliber of people that are in this industry.
Yeah. In my area, I'm one of the 2 or 3 producers of a similar size, maybe even one of the bigger ones in that cohort of pasture poultry, selling into my one market. And I go to some of those guys and ask them questions, and one of them's been doing it longer than me, but we raise more birds than him now, and I don't know of anybody else doing kind of exactly how we're doing it, but I just didn't realize how many people there were who had spent decades raising 5 figures of birds and solving all the problems from the hatchery all the way forward to the marketing of the product. And we really are lucky to have so many people who, although they might not be my neighbors, they have a lot of experience and intelligence and ability to help each other. What was something that you caught at the conference that was a big takeaway, or maybe a couple things that you thought were going to be actionable items for you?
Yes, I think for me, the biggest thing was to realize the scale that some of these producers are doing.
Yeah.
I think where I'm at, I'm one of the biggest, if not the biggest, meat farm, poultry farm in the area.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one other that does general. But coming to this conference just kind of opened my eyes to the scale that a lot of these people are at.
Yeah.
Doing, 10, 20, 100,000, 400,000 birds a year.
Yeah.
And so it kind of showed me a new ceiling.
Sure.
To be able to reach for. Because I used to think like 2,000 chickens was like the apex of farming.
Yeah.
But now I realize there's so much more out there to achieve.
Yeah.
I think that was a big one.
Do you feel like significant growth is possible, or do you feel like it's necessary or important or good for you in the future?
I think possible is more the path. Necessary, I don't think it's necessary. I think I'm comfortable at the place that my business is, but do I want to grow and have a bigger impact on the, regenerative meat, or do I want to just kind of stay small and do my little niche thing?
Yeah.
And so I think there's definitely a internal battle there.
Sure.
But I think that possibilities are always there, and it's a question of figuring them out. I think that in my context, there's a lot more scalability available with ducks than with chickens.
Sure.
But I think that there's always an opportunity, even if we don't realize that the opportunity is there. So I think it's a question of fleshing out ideas and trying things.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I feel the same way that when I went for the first time 2 years ago to the conference in Arkansas where they had it, I was also blown away with the number of farms out there who are producing 10, 20, 30,000 chickens on pasture a year and doing a great job of it. I'd never heard of them before, and they're making a good living and really taking care of their families and producing a lot of meat. And someone can produce 10 times as much chicken as me and do it unprofitably. I'm not saying that that's the only metric, but it was impressive to me to realize what folks are doing out there. And so I was thankful for the realization that was out there, and the ceiling was bumped up for me in terms of what I thought could be done. Did you have any take-homes you think you might be implementing?
Definitely.
I'm sure there's a list.
Yeah. One of them is, one thing that stands out is the guys at White Oak Pastures were saying that they feed their ducks whole white meat 2 weeks before processing.
They did say white, not red?
They said white.
Huh, interesting.
That's what I remember.
Okay.
And that does two things. It gets a layer of fat on there, but it also helps in processing for the feathers to shed. So I'm going to try that. Is one thing. I think another thing is, it seems like a lot of the really big producers are doing shelters for their broilers where they're kept inside a portable shelter, and they live their lives inside that shelter. And I do a free-range system like you do, Luke.
Yes.
Where I have the shelters and the birds can go in them if they need to or want to, but they're free to range inside an electric net.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's positives and negatives to that. And I think I'm going to try to do a middle ground where I design a bigger shelter, but still don't have sides on it, so the birds can go in and out. And that will eliminate the need to move instead of 8 shelters.
Yeah.
I'm only moving 3 or 4.
Well, I don't know what kind of problems you might have run into in a really big thunderstorm rolls in quick, but I have had a couple piling incidents when I've had shelters that were smaller and maybe not evenly or closely spaced necessarily. If you have a small shelter and all the chickens rush under one small shelter when you had 5 other small shelters, that can become lethal fast.
Absolutely.
In a group of 600, 800, 1,000 chickens. And so a fewer number of larger sized shelters, even with the ability to run in and out, can mitigate that significantly, especially if they're placed close to each other.
Sure.
The last day of the conference was a tour of Pasture Life Farm with Dave and Ginger Shields. He's an amazing innovator in our space. He's got many inventions he's produced that have wowed and impressed many of us. I'm sure we can get into a number of those, but he also has produced some mid-size chicken pens for those who do pasture poultry in a floorless pen with 4 walls with full enclosure of the animals. And like you said, I do chickens the way you described. The ability to roam and move in or out of a shelter with a bit more freedom than a lot of other people provide. As you were seeing some of his shelters on his farm that were in the, I want to say 14 by 24 if I recall correctly, maybe by 20. Did you have any big take-homes in terms of what a new shade shelter might look like for you?
Yeah, I think something like that would be nice. Right now I do everything by hand. I don't have a tractor or an ATV.
Sure.
If I'm going out in the field in a vehicle, it's my truck.
Yeah, same with me.
So, I mean, something that, and I don't really want to be out there pulling things with my truck, especially with the free range, because then they're going to be in my way and I'll be running them over.
Yeah.
But I think something like that, that I could, if I can figure out, like the idea going in my head right now is a PVC lightweight shelter that just has a tarp on it. One of the other ideas pulled away from this conference is those bunker tarps that they talked about.
Also known as like a silage tarp.
Yeah. Something like that, and just throwing that over like a 20 by 20 PVC square. Because right now I use 10 by 10 PVC tractors.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about, I'm not trying to protect it from predation. It's just a shelter from the rain, basically.
You got electric netting for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if it's just, if it's, I can pull a 20 by 20 by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not living in there, one of those, the 20 by 20 is probably big enough for 400 chickens or 500 chickens.
Yeah.
They only are going to be using for shade, not to live in, so they have room to run around elsewhere.
Or if it's raining,
Or if it's raining.
I guess you just want to make sure that it doesn't blow away because it is a large, lightweight sail.
Yeah, I mean, but I have the 10 by 10 PVC tractors, and they never blow away, and I've had those for 6 seasons.
Okay.
And it's never been an issue.
That's great.
So I guess a 20 by 20 would have more surface area, but it's something to play with, build a prototype and see how it works.
Sure.
But I think like his style, it was definitely like, it was really kind of cool to see how nice that system was.
Yeah.
And definitely something that I can see being really hospitable for chickens.
Yeah. No, it was a really nice shelter.
So it's definitely something to think about.
And just to be clear about what we're talking about with Dave and Ginger, what they've built there is they've got these mid-size shelters that house about 200 per each, I think, yeah. And they're a hoop made out of mint tubing, similar to a greenhouse hoop, and they're tall enough to walk down the middle of. And yeah, they're quite impressive structures for about $1,200 in material. You and I both, at least as of now, we produce chickens without walls. They get to roam around a pretty large area in relation compared to one of these shelters.
Yeah, I think they have there's definitely an argument about quality of life to be made about that.
Sure.
And I think for me, the biggest benefit has been my quality of life.
Yeah.
By not having to be tied to moving those chicken tractors every day, I've given myself a tremendous amount of freedom.
Yeah.
And so that to me, I would have a hard time going back to an enclosed shelter.
Mm-hmm. So are you not moving it every day to move the manure at this point, or?
I do, but I don't have to do it first thing in the morning every single day.
Okay.
If I do it, for example, let's say I do it at 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
Sure.
Then I don't have to, and then I know that say at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, I'm thinking tomorrow's gonna be a really busy day, and I don't want to come out here and do my chicken chores.
Yeah.
I won't have time, so then I can do them instead in the afternoon on Wednesday, and then Thursday I don't have to do the chicken chores at all.
Okay.
Whereas if you have those enclosed shelters, even if you move them in the afternoon, by the morning they're going to be the birds are going to sleep under them, and they're going to be pretty
In their manure,
in the manure by the next day.
For sure.
So I've given myself a tremendous amount of freedom and quality of life to not have to move them every single day.
Yeah, and the other thing I've found is that there's a significant amount of flexibility in terms of just being aware. I mean, let's just say you have a 26-day-old chick or a 22-day-old chick. The amount of manure that individual is going to put down is paltry compared to a, let's say, 60-day-old chick.
Absolutely.
Or 55 or what have you. So chicken at that point. So in the end, we can move the shelters more or less often, which is something that people with enclosed chicken tractors can do, but we can also just bring in another shade shelter once they come up to a size that warrants the additional shade. And we can adjust how we're laying down manure based on the needs of the field and the flock for sanitation. In terms of how quickly you might move that shelter, the temperature outside will determine greatly how much time the chickens will spend under the shelter versus kind of out roaming around, as well as the age of the birds. But we have the ability to sort of play with that and let the manure spread in a little bit different pattern that isn't just so much from like a little bit of manure early on a 10 by 12 square and a lot of manure late on a 10 by 12 square. We can sort of massage it a little bit more to be more even throughout.
I do think one of the benefits of the enclosed shelter system, though, is that they are protected all the time from the elements.
Yeah, and the predators.
And
of all kinds. Yeah.
If a big rainstorm comes through, there's no guarantee that actually my chickens are going to go into the shelter.
Sure thing, especially if they're 3 weeks old and they're new to all this.
That's right.
It can get ugly, and we've had more losses from weather than predators ourselves with this system.
Absolutely.
And we all have to figure out ways of mitigating that. I mean, since you and I are the two people I know doing this system the best. I'll just say about that. We found that mitigating those problems, and we've had two strategies. One, and this is one that I learned from Will Harris. He told me about it at the last conference I went to, which is he tries to, unless he has a real clear forecast, he will not pull his chicks out of the brooder until they're a full 4 weeks. At least that's what he told me a couple of years ago at the APPPA Arkansas conference. And I actually started sort of just once we got our new bigger brooder built, I sort of started keeping my birds in the brooder a little bit longer because the system does offer a little bit more freedom, and with that freedom comes some responsibility for the chickens to not go outside and kill their young little bodies in a thunderstorm. The other thing I've done before is I've had a chicken tractor or 3 chicken tractors, and I've kept my chickens enclosed with the door shut for the first week and a half, let's say from day 21 to day 30. I've kept my chickens enclosed in that shelter, and then we open the door and let them roam around behind electric netting. After they get used to using that shelter, after their bodies get a little bit bigger, they'll be a little more adapted to being outside. And then they can't get stuck outside in a thunderstorm. So we sort of, we've done both, but it's all about allowing them that freedom when they can handle it without dying. So, do you have any other strategies or any other ways you've tried to mitigate that when it comes to what's often called day range model or a truly free range model that you and I do?
I think that I expect higher losses.
Okay, that's one way of doing it.
But my labor is way down, so I think I just accept that, and hopefully there's no PETA people listening. It's just I accept it, and I'm okay with it because I know how much more it does for my quality of life, and I will make decisions for my quality of life. To an extent, if I really wanted quality of life, I'd raise them all in a barn the whole time.
Sure.
But to an extent without sacrificing my morals, my values.
Yeah, and
my mission.
We of course want to take good care of our animals. And I'll just use an analogy. We want to take good care of our children. I've 4 children, and none of them are currently wrapped in bubble wrap, even though that might be a somewhat safer choice for them, given that they like to bounce off of hard surfaces sometimes. So, in the end, our children are more important to us than our chickens. So we provide them a little bit more of a safe environment than our chickens. But in the end, we have to balance their safety with their overall well-being and our overall well-being. And all 3 of those things are sometimes a give and take. It's not exactly a zero-sum game on all fronts, but in many respects, or in many metrics, we've got to sort of tug on one side and realize that there might be a tug on the other side. And in the end, I think it's good for kids to run around. It's good for chickens to run around outside too.
It is.
And they're both dangerous, but we just have to decide what's the appropriate amount of danger and risk in order to give them the life on barefoot on grass that we want them all to have, children and chickens alike.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is, as much as it is for my quality of life, the chickens are so much, it seems like they just have a much better life than they do when I used to do them inside a chicken factory.
Yeah, and I do say that, and I agree with that, and knowing that people who raise chickens inside of an enclosed shelter on pasture probably are listening, and they're my friends. I always just want to be quick to say that if my chickens have a better life than theirs, and I think you can make the argument that they do, I also want to make that argument with the full understanding that 99.997% of other chickens in the world do not have as good of a life as a chicken tractor chicken. So far be it from me to go turn my nose up at those chickens. They're still a super premium product, and they're having a super premium great life. It's just that we're raising some free range kids on my farm, and we're raising some free range chickens because we like it, and it's our style, and our chickens like it, and our kids like it. We did talk about ducks some. You and I were in a breakout session where duck producers were talking. Mark from White Oak Pastures, who's their production manager, I believe, he was in there, and you and I might have been the 4th and 5th biggest duck producers in that room, or 2nd and 5th, I don't know. But he's produced more ducks than everybody in that room combined, times 10.
Unquestionably, I think he said they're doing 12,000 a year.
It was at least that, if not more. And they've been doing it for plenty of years, from what I gathered too. And they process their own ducks. I mean, they're a major player in our space, and they had a lot of experience. And he had a lot to offer. You just mentioned the wheat idea that is supposed to help with the potential for niacin deficiencies with ducks, but also the other quality along the way in terms of processing, the flavor of the fat. He just said it's a slam dunk home run, and so I definitely thought hard about making sure I was going to implement that this year. It's something I've offered free choice to turkeys, or even mixed in with grit to encourage grit eating, because I've heard people mention that around APPPA circles, but I never thought about it for ducks, and I'm glad that I went there just for that. I mean, if it ends up improving the quality of our duck product and the pluckability and the flavor and the life of those ducks, that sounds like a big win to me. Was there anything else we talked about with waterfowl and ducks that you thought were great take-homes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just speaking for most of the people in that audience, or in the conversation, they were mostly, interested in the, how do you produce them, and they've wanted to, but I guess the hardship has always been processing.
Sure.
And so I think that, people had different ideas for processing, and it sounds like a good number of people who walked away from that conversation felt confident that they were going to go tackle ducks again.
Yeah.
I think that was cool.
That was really cool. Yeah. And I think you were a big part of helping out with that. I mean, there were some people who had tried ducks a number of times and were processing on their own and hadn't nailed the processing. And Mark was the production manager, and he had some help with the processing discussion, but he doesn't do the processing on their farm. And then I think Mike Badger, who's the director of APPPA, was in there, and he's processed some ducks over a long and illustrious pasture poultry processing career. So there was some great tips and tricks that were thrown out there. What were the couple of the things that you were able to offer to help people who needed some fresh ideas for how to get a duck clean?
I think the number one thing is to do the age.
The timing.
The timing. So you got to get them between 7 and 8 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that window, you're going to have some issues with pin feathers. But that's your number one thing. I think that's probably the number one issue that people have. And if you're having pin feathers at any time, then you're missing that window.
Yeah.
If you process them outside that window, then you don't have pin feather issues. The second thing is going to be to get a good scald on them. And so I like to do like 147 degrees for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And then you pluck them for about that same length of time.
Okay.
And they are, ducks compared to like a chicken, are really, really resilient. So they can take a real beating in the plucker.
And how many ducks do you put in your 27, 28 inch plucker?
I think we're doing 4 or 6.
Okay. Great. And then, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I think there was one guy who was, hitting that window and still having issues. And another idea that came was that maybe he was having nutrition issues, or that his plucker wasn't big enough. So I haven't experienced that firsthand, but it seems to be, I guess, his next, point to try to figure out is adjust those 2 factors and see if there's a change.
Were you in the conversation about shipping?
I was not. No.
Okay. Have you ever considered shipping your products?
I have, and I've even shipped product before.
You have? Okay. Well, how did that go for you?
I think that what I realized is that shipping meat is really expensive, and that the people who do it, they basically offer free shipping.
A lot of them do, yeah.
Amortize the cost of the shipping in the cost of the product.
Right.
So the meat becomes, instead of $6 a pound for a chicken, it's actually $9 a pound is what you're paying, but it's free shipping.
Paying the shipping and the price of package, yeah.
But the customer is going to be happy to, pay for the convenience to have it shipped to their door.
Yeah.
So I think if that ever became something for me, I'd probably start a second business. And then
that makes sense.
And just, have an online store and call it Ben's Meat by Mail or something. I don't know. And,
that has a nice ring to it.
Yeah. And yeah, just have a different price point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that, and also I think for me at the scale that I did it at, I was, driving into town to buy a cooler of dry ice to go to the UPS store.
Right.
And I think that there's a certain economy.
It's like making
of
a
scale.
delivery. if we were doing one-offs or whatever, yeah.
That's right. So I think there's an economy of scale to be able to get enough orders.
Sure.
To be able to justify that trip. Or if you're really big, you can get the dry ice and the coolers and the UPS to come to you.
Yeah, and you can get those at a discount. There's a whole lot of economies of scale that can help with that. About shipping, we are people who are going to have to meet people on either price, convenience, or quality, and really we're going to have to meet people on 2 out of 3. And if we really want to make the sales. And so, and that's just the kind of the reality of being business people in this business. And the convenience factor is becoming more and more important. People are expecting more and more out of us in that regard. So in order to produce that for people, we're going to have to find some way to bump up the convenience coefficient. And shipping is one way we can do that. And a lot of people who are really into local foods are going to have a hard time with it, but we are just going to have to figure out which things really are our core principles and which are not. There was some really, really wise and helpful tips in that session just about kind of how to think about it. One of the ideas I really liked that I thought if we were to dip our toe in the waters, it might be doing it this way, which is to offer through email or Instagram or even maybe through some paid Facebook posts or or who knows what, but to offer, say like 20 variety packs. Maybe just say it has 4 pork chops, a whole chicken, a pound of bacon, a pack of thighs, and a pack of breasts, and a pack of ground beef. We could offer all these things in one variety bundle for $150 to be shipped out on the Tuesday after next, and you can buy it on the website, and then you could test it out. Expect to get feedback from these people on how the whole process went, but you throw out the one-time variety bundle. You sell 20 of them. You get all your insulated lined boxes. You work with FedEx, and you ship it out the door, and then try to get some feedback from your customers and yourself on how that worked, and see if the sales are there from your channels that you're able to sell to. It might be people from across the country, or as far as your FedEx 1 day or 2 day window goes, and it might even be the case that you might sell stuff locally through FedEx, but people just want the convenience of having it show up on their front door. But I like the idea of sort of dipping your toe in a way that doesn't commit to opening up a brand new website or brand, and you can sort of just put it out there and see if it's something you want to do, and then maybe one day down the line start offering a la carte cuts and the ability to open up a shopping cart online and put stuff in it. But yeah, we probably won't be doing it anytime soon, but if we did, it would probably be kind of starting out that way.
Yeah, I think that the trend of our economy is certainly going in that direction. I've heard numbers that grocery store sales are down and that home deliveries are up. And so I think that trend is just going to continue to go in that direction.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I think as farmers to be, thinking about this, because if you're selling at a farmer's market like you and I are, that's a very inconvenient model. Everyone has to wake up at a Saturday morning and early in the morning with their kids and the day off of work and trudge down to the farmer's market and spend an hour purchasing from all their friendly farmer friends.
Yeah.
But it's not convenient, and like you said, it's not scalable either. So
right.
How do we attain that next level of staying in touch with the market and being able to be scalable and relevant to the marketplace?
Yeah. And in the end, if people expect cut up chickens to make things more convenient, then we can go where the customers are or not. We can't force anybody to buy our products, and the same goes with other things that make it more convenient. In the end, the way I look at what a value add is for a customer is anything that gets the food closer to their lips and breaks down any barriers and getting it there. And that can look like grinding sausage up for somebody so they don't have to grind it themselves. It can look like cutting up a chicken. It can look like helping them decide what to eat and get it to their house, and procure it in a way that's maximally convenient. Maybe we could just talk for a little bit about some of the we already mentioned the tour at Pastured Life. Dave and Ginger Shields, they were our hosts at the conference, and the last day was a tour of their farm. And one of the farm tours I've been most excited to go on, because they have invented a lot of really great things, and not just inventions, but also processes that are really amazing to me as somebody who farms with a bunch of kids, and their kids are older than mine. But the idea that they're able to do this with their kids, and that's their full labor force, it's a really neat place, and a really, really neat, beautiful bunch of people who are clearly meeting the goals of their life to be able to farm together as a family. But what were some of the big take-homes you got?
I think the portable brooder is a really cool idea.
Yeah.
He's got these portable brooders he built on a trailer back, and he's just got one of those silage tarps or billboard tarps on him, and he's got a heater in there. And what's cool is he can pull it around, so if it needs to be if he's got a storm coming through, he needs to put it in a safe place, or he can bring the whole trailer out to the pasture, and then what he does is he attaches a kid's slide to it, and then rather than catching the chickens and moving them out to the pasture like we all do,
Right.
he just backs the trailer up to his pasture shelters, and then just pushes them down the slide into the
Right.
pens. And I think that is pretty cool.
It's less stressful than getting grabbed and thrown in a box, and then the box being opened up and getting grabbed again, and then nobody's throwing chickens, but then getting placed out of the box
That's right.
again. Certainly less stressful than that experience.
Less stressful for the birds and the farmer.
Right. The
and
the bending
savings.
over on the back is not a fun thing with that task for sure.
That's one of my least favorite chores, is catching chickens.
We have a few farm hands who help us, and I always schedule for them to come on that day.
I think another really cool innovation he had was he had a hopper that he attached to his trough feeder, so it could hold 75 pounds of feed.
And that was all just screwed together, plywood mostly.
Yep. That was really cool. I think another amazing innovation, which will save potentially thousands of chicken farmers' backs, is he has a system where he built PVC pipes onto a trailer, and the crates are able to he's able to load the birds onto the trailer, and slide them into position, and then he never has, and then when he processes on farm, he can again just bring slide the crates to where they need to be, and then unload the birds, and then once the crate is empty, then he can move the empty crate.
Yeah.
And I think that is huge.
For somebody who's, he's in his early 40s, I think, mid 40s, and he's like many of us, his back doesn't feel as good as it used to, and he's farming with all of his children and his wife. There's no team full of young people's bodies to abuse, who are grown people who can lift a 70 or 80 pound crate of chickens. And I thought it was brilliant, and the fact that nobody has to lift a full crate of chickens. He's producing 10,000 chickens on his farm with 2 adults and 6 children, and they're processing everything on their own. So,
and he never had to lift a crate.
And he never has to lift a crate full of birds, whether they be 3 weeks old or 8 weeks old. And yeah, that's really remarkable. And my back has had some significant problems, and I'm thankful to say that I can only imagine how great it would be to be able to say that I never have to lift one of those again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My general rule of thumb is 2 people lift it.
Yeah, I have one employee who's fine to do it himself. I tell him he probably shouldn't, but I let him. And but everybody else, it's 2 per crate.
Yep.
Or sometimes we'll have somebody. We'll do 3 people carrying 2 crates, and the person in the middle's,
carries 2.
He's holding half of 2.
Yep.
We've done that before.
We do too.
But yeah, and that's a little bit efficient, but this is both efficient in terms of time, but also in terms of wear and tear on our bodies, which is going to be one of the biggest limiting factors of our lives as people who farm.
Absolutely.
Farm in a way that's not fully mechanized with an air-conditioned cab on a tractor. Maybe they get wear and tear on their bodies too. I don't know.
They have their own back issues.
Yeah, they got them before they got in the cab. Yeah, great. I do want to hear what maybe 1 or 2 quick things you heard from his processing facility. I know you have your own processing facility, and so yeah, just kind of maybe tell me, if you could, what you thought about how Dave and Ginger put that facility together and organized it, built it, and run their processes in it.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that really struck out is how clean it is.
Yeah.
They have this washable wall
They're SIPS panels, right?
SIPS panels, yeah, that's right. And I really like that. It's just super clean. And of course, he had a farm tour, so it's probably cleaner than it normally is. But
Perhaps, yeah.
In any case, it's a place you'd feel comfortable hanging out and eating dinner. I wouldn't mind eating dinner off those tables.
Yeah.
They were clean.
And it's funny, he and his kids pack up. He said on packaging days they actually have a big screen television in there, and they do watch movies while they're vacuum sealing and labeling their packages, because their family works together. They process 10,000 birds together, and so they are actually hanging out in there a lot of the time. So I thought it was neat that he sort of acknowledged that reality, and let's not make this a terrible time. And obviously, the environment not being smelly, disgusting, blood splattered walls helps with it being a place you want to hang out in with your kids, but also having fun with what you're doing is great too.
Absolutely. So I think that really struck me. He had a really nice drainage system, which I liked.
Was it just a cut open floor drain, or that
Yeah,
led to a 2-inch pipe? Or?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think one thing is he intentionally designed his facility and built it. And I think I inherited an old building.
Yeah.
And I repurposed it. And
That's
so
just part of the reality. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so. I wouldn't trade my free building for anything.
You're not going to tear it down.
No. No. But it's cool to see. It's a really small space. I mean, it's probably not more than 12 feet wide by 20 feet long. I think that's pretty generous to say it's even that big.
Yeah.
It is. It's a really small space, and so I think it's really well thought out. And it was cool. And one thing that I saw there that I'm moving towards, and this is probably the reason why it is so clean in there, is because he's doing all his killing, scalding, and plucking outside.
Yeah.
And so he has a concrete pad outside that he does his processing in, or he does all the killing, scalding, and plucking in. And so he's then taking his plucked chickens and passing them through the window. There's an actual window built into the wall, and that's separation of the dirty to the clean room.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool to have that.
That's great. I think they've got a really good process, a good design, good workflow, and it's safe and clean, and a place where a farm family works together, and does so in a way that hopefully maximizes the utility for their family, their customers, and their chickens as they're entering their last few moments. When it came to his place, I mean, we talked about his shelters, and he talked about what he calls the crate skate, which I'm sure if you follow Pastured Life Farm, you can see what they've produced there. It's a really cool little invention, PVC and a trailer frame and some welded together iron to kind of hold it together, and then some electrical conduit inside the PVC for the things to skate on. And yeah, they just slide even when they're a stack of 300 pounds worth of chickens. Yeah, other stuff that we did there, I mean, we got to eat a great meal. One of his food truck customers, and the brooder, I forget if you mentioned this, but not only can he slide the chicks right out the back, but he has a floor that's what's underneath the shavings or the peat moss that he has as his brooder substrate is a tarp that is attached to a boat winch and an axle, and so he can, once he lets his chicks out, he can just roll that tarp up, and all the chicken manure just comes right off the back. Not only does he not have to take a wheelbarrow full of chicken manure, which is something I'm actually going to be doing later this week, but not only does he not have to haul a wheelbarrow to a compost pile, but he can also, because he can drive the trailer, but he can also just turn this crank and just dump off all the manure right out the back of the trailer. I thought it was really remarkable, and
Yeah, I agree. That's huge.
yeah, it was almost like we were on one side of the brooder trailer, and everybody was saying, "Wow, this is amazing! This looks great! I love what you've done here." And then he, like the magician who puts up his finger and says, "But there's more! Come around the back."
Yep.
And then he did, and then we checked out that little piece in the back, and yeah, it was quite impressive. Just seeing how he could turn a crank for a couple minutes, and presumably the bedding from just one batch of chicks could just all dump out the back. He would roll the tarp up, and then he could unroll it and put more bedding on there for the next batch of chicks. It was pretty amazing. We were lucky to kind of get to see some of those designs. Yeah, everything they're doing is really cool, and we appreciate them hosting the conference. I think that about covers it for our APPA 2020 recap. If you were there at the conference, we really enjoyed hanging out with you and talking and eating, learning from each other. Ben, thanks for helping me recap APPA 2020. It was a great time. Hopefully we can head down there again next year. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
And that's our recap of APPA 2020. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Pasture-Raised podcast. Again, you'll be hearing more from Ben in the future. But a big thanks to Ben for helping me break this down and joining me on the podcast today. Feel free to like, subscribe, do all those things in your podcast player of choice. And I'd love to hear back from you if you want to let me know how you've liked the podcast so far. If you have any feedback, my email address is info@grossfamilyfarm.com. That's GROCE. And find me on Instagram or all the other places, Gross Family Farm. Again, that's GROCE. Thanks a bunch, and we will see you next week.